Lynette Adkins is not exactly the person you'd expect to kickstart a social media conversation about international terrorism and how Osama bin Laden might have done the right thing by ordering the 9/11 terrorist attacks. For one thing, Lynette Adkins is a recent college graduate whose most recent video on YouTube is entitled "Getting Hotter and Making Friends in LA." In 2021, Adkins was profiled by the Los Angeles Times not for her great insights on world affairs, but because of her videos on, quote, college life, skin, and hair care, including a tutorial for black women growing out their natural hair. Adkins, the Times reported, was mainly successful because she often told her followers, which now number well over 200,000 on various social media platforms, how they could quit their white-collar jobs and become a vapid social media personality like herself. But just a couple of days ago, Adkins offered an insight into a very different topic, claiming that she was in the midst of an existential crisis. Adkins posted this short video on TikTok. Watch.
I need everyone to stop what they're doing right now and go read. It's literally 2 pages. Go read A Letter to America. And please come back here and just let me know what you think, because I feel like I'm going through like an existential crisis right now, and a lot of people are. So I just need someone else to be feeling this too.
She's having an existential crisis, she says. Now, we're a long way from telling black women how to grow out their natural hair. In that clip, Adkins conspicuously doesn't mention what A Letter to America is, apparently because she's worried that people might not be interested in the document. They might not go and look it up if they were to learn ahead of time that it was Osama bin Laden's manifesto justifying the 9/11 attacks. But in the end, Adkins' ploy apparently worked. As the New York Post reported, Adkins single-handedly, quote, jump-started a flood of activity on social media, and especially on TikTok, about Osama bin Laden's manifesto. Several other outlets also credited Adkins for what happened next. And what happened next is that the hashtag Letter to America was trending on TikTok, had more than 14 million views as of Thursday afternoon. And on Twitter, the same hashtag quickly accounted for nearly 100,000 posts. So this letter from Osama bin Laden has become, decades later, an internet sensation. The journalist Yashar Ali reported that in thousands of TikToks, people of all races, ethnicities, backgrounds responded to bin Laden's letter. And for the most part, these TikToks involved young people saying that bin Laden's letter has led to them to reevaluate their perspective on terrorism and how it can be, in fact, they're saying now, a legitimate form of protest to a hostile colonizing power. He uploaded just a small sample of those TikToks, and we will take a look at a small sample of that sample. Here it is.
This morning I read Letter to America, which is Osama bin Laden's letter to America explaining why he attacked Americans. And I am ashamed to say that I not only have never read this letter, but I didn't even know this letter existed. It's wild, and everyone should read it. If you haven't read it yet, read it. However, be forewarned that this has left me very disillusioned, and I feel the same exact way I felt when I was deconstructing Christianity. I feel a little bit just confused, like I have entered into another timeline. What is this? And yeah, so go read it.
So I just read A Letter to America, and I will never look at life the same. I will never look at this country the same. Please read it. And if you have read it, let me know if you are also going through an existential crisis in this very moment, because in the last 20 minutes, my entire viewpoint on the entire life I have believed and I have lived has changed. Please read that entire letter.
I need you to stop what you're doing and go read A Letter to America. It is literally the craziest thing I've read in a while. And while I can't say that I'm that surprised, I am pretty shocked. So go read it and tell me what you think, because I really also need to talk to other people about this. And actually, before you even read the letter, I did want to mention, in reading the letter, I could only think of this tweet that I saw the other day. Under settler colonialism, any kind of resistance is branded as terrorist because the only acceptable violence is violence by the occupier.
Okay, so Osama bin Laden, the mass murderer of 3,000 people, has opened their eyes. He has enlightened them with his penetrating insights and deep wisdom. And they're talking about this letter like they said it will absolutely change your life, which, by the way, I have read the letter. And it is, on top of being the ramblings of a mass murderer, it is not nearly as insightful as they're making it out to be. And it also includes a whole lot of things that these people, being that they're left-wing TikTokers, must not have noticed, because Osama bin Laden's ideology, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's not exactly one that you would think these people would generally agree with. And, for anyone who lived through 9/11, which many of these TikTok personalities didn't, and I think that's part of the issue here, it still is, it's hard for us to make sense of this. 20 years ago, even the most rabid leftists on college campuses didn't go out in public and proudly suggest that bin Laden was justified. That would have been unthinkable. Instead, the left generally agreed that acts of terrorism that kill thousands of U.S. citizens are bad. The mass protests that we saw after 9/11, which began in earnest in 2002, were almost entirely in response to the planned U.S. military intervention in Iraq, a country that, it turns out, didn't have anything to do with 9/11. That was the concern there. Until that point, the country was mostly unified. There was no groundswell of support on the left in defense of 9/11 on the internet or anywhere else. So what changed? Well, for one thing, academic theories of decolonization as the reaction to the events in the Middle East currently has made clear, these ideas are not just academic anymore. They have filtered down from the university system into the mainstream. But as I've said repeatedly, decolonization, it's about much more than Israel. And this latest TikTok trend makes that very clear. The ultimate objective of decolonizers is the destruction of anything that these zealots perceive as too white. Yet again, we're facing the threat of a government shutdown later this month, and yet again, the administration will ultimately deal with it the same way they always do, with more spending. More spending will inevitably devalue the dollar. Protect your savings then by diversifying into gold with the help of Birch Gold Group. And here's the best part. When you open an IRA with Birch Gold, for every $10,000 you spend by December 22nd, Birch Gold will send you a free gold bar. Just text Walsh to 989898 to claim eligibility before Black Friday. Birch Gold can even help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold without taking any money out of pocket, and you still get the free gold bar. So with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of satisfied customers, you can count on Birch Gold to help you transition into an existing You can count on Birch Gold to help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. Don't let your savings fall victim to the further devaluation of the dollar. Text Walsh to 989898, receive a free info kit on gold, and claim your eligibility before Black Friday to receive free gold bars on all qualifying purchases. That's Walsh to 989898. Decolonization is a genocidal ideology. It expressly justifies the mass slaughter of innocents, white innocents specifically, on the grounds that no white person can actually be innocent. That was certainly Osama bin Laden's view of things, and these TikTokers agree with him. And of course, that means that the thousands of people who died on 9/11 were not innocent by this logic. Most of the people living in the United States right now are not innocent. One of the many striking aspects of this ideology is how incoherent and self-defeating it is. I mean, if Libs of TikTok's videos are any indication, people on TikTok would be among the very first to get stoned to death if bin Laden's version of Sharia law ever came to the United States, which, by the way, is another demand in bin Laden's letter, the total subservience of the West to Sharia law. I guess these people didn't notice that or don't know what it means, or both. Only a defeated and very confused people with a constant connection to other very confused and defeated people on the internet would ever support their own eradication like this. But none of these people uploading this nonsense to TikTok actually came up with this idea on their own, of course, for a long time now. Many commentators have lamented that, the schools are failing and asking, what are they teaching these kids and so on in response to these videos. I've seen a lot of that on Twitter. People say, oh, look at the schools failing. What are they teaching the kids in these schools? Well, the answer is pretty clear. What are they teaching kids in schools? They're teaching them this. This is what they're teaching them. Schools have not failed, actually. They have succeeded in creating exactly the sort of people that they set out to create. Now, the schools in our country may not be explicitly defending bin Laden, or maybe they are in some cases, but mostly they are spreading a deep hatred of white Western civilization. They have taught that colonization is an abject and eternal evil with no positive upshot whatsoever. They've told students that the very idea of policing is a white supremacist concept intended to victimize black people. They've taught that whiteness is a sickness, a cancer that must be eradicated. This is the actual language that is being used in schools. Of course, they've said the same thing about the fundamental concepts of biology and other concepts as well. Schools want students to grow into adults who hate this country and hate the truth and hate reality and everything about it. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. We are seeing the fruits of all of that labor. At the same time, it needs to be said that the blame doesn't entirely fall on the university system or the school system. For one thing, it's probably not a coincidence that this trend is taking off on a Chinese social media app. As hard as this may be to believe, there are consequences, it turns out, to allowing millions of kids to spend their entire day ingesting content from an algorithm controlled by a communist adversary. In a follow-up video, the woman who apparently started this whole trend on TikTok, Lynette Adkins, went on to acknowledge that TikTok has a role in reprogramming Americans. Watch.
When I tell y'all TikTok is going to save this generation, the amount of things that we've learned on this app in this past month alone, that other people in other generations, I try to talk to them about it, they don't understand, they don't get it. Because they've been literally so programmed to think a certain way. TikTok is undoing all of that. It's crazy to watch in real time. If you haven't already, go read A Letter to America.
Yeah. And by the way, just so you know, you're not teaching us anything we didn't know. Oh, did you know that Osama bin Laden attacked the United States because he hated Western civilization? Oh, really? I had no idea. No, you're the first person that we had no clue that was why. We've been wondering all this time. We had wondered about that. And thankfully, some 20-somethings on TikTok came along 20 years later to inform us. So we really appreciate that. We had no clue. I had no idea. I thought that Osama bin Laden loved the West. So I didn't know. Now, young people, Lynette Adkins says, have been so programmed to think a certain way. And now she says, quote, TikTok is undoing all that. It's crazy to watch it in real time. And that is an understatement. It may be the only true and useful thing that Lynette has ever said on her various social media channels. And apparently it's the last thing she's going to say. Because as of this morning, Lynette's videos on TikTok, including the one I just showed you, are all inaccessible. Her account apparently does not exist anymore. It's not clear whether TikTok took her account down or if she deleted her account herself. We reached out to her for an explanation. She didn't respond. And for its part, TikTok is claiming to be outraged by all this. They've suppressed any videos that use the term Letter to America or Osama bin Laden. You try to search for it, you'll get a warning about community guidelines. And the company has put out statements saying that they're horrified that this letter has resurfaced. They're horrified. They're not the only ones saying that. The Guardian, which hosted a version of this letter on their website for the past 20 years, deleted the letter from its website in response to all the traffic from TikTok. And of course, in response, interest in bin Laden's letter only grew from there because you can't delete anything from the internet. And if you try, you just encourage more people to seek it out, which is why the Guardian's decision to delete the letter was ridiculous and did more harm than good. So you can interpret these reactions from TikTok and the Guardian however you want. You could choose to believe that a social media platform controlled by the Communist Party of China is deeply upset that American youth are talking about how bin Laden was justified in taking down the Twin Towers. You could choose to believe that social media mercenary Lynette Adkins, for some reason, decided to, out of the blue one day, to promote this whole idea. You know, you could ignore how strange it is that this person of everyone would start this trend and then disappear from social media. But no matter what, whether you think this is just the latest successful Chinese propaganda effort or not, one fact remains, which no amount of online censorship can change. The truth is that after 9/11, there were scattered reports of celebrations that broke out in response to the violence. Most of those reports are unverified and disputed to this day. But if another 9/11 happened today, it would not be difficult to find people celebrating. All you'd have to do is look at any college campus or go on TikTok. That is the harshest reality to contemplate here. Everybody was basically on the same page after 9/11. Okay, sometimes I think, overstate when people talk about the unity, the great unity we had as a country after 9/11. I think that's oftentimes overstated. But it is true that after 9/11, anyone who went through it knows this, everybody was sad, everybody was angry. And so we were on the same page in that way. And that was the last time we would all be on the same page about anything. If a similar attack was launched today, we would not even be able to agree that it's a sad thing. And that fact is now unavoidable. It's unavoidable because of an ideology that both parties have been subsidizing in the university system and public school system for decades. This is an ideology that our leaders have done nothing to combat for all the years it's festered. In fact, they have only facilitated and promoted it. So now, instead of our young people looking up to great authors or public servants or something like that, people with good moral character, they look up to tedious social media influencers like Lynette Adkins. They look up to Osama bin Laden. And that's as humiliating an indictment of a society as you can find. But for China, which controls TikTok, it's fantastic news. Xi Jinping just promised at the APEC summit that there will be no hot war with the United States. But what he didn't say is that he won't need to launch a hot war in order to weaken, delegitimize, and ultimately destroy this country. All he needs to do is have an army of useful idiots who want to destroy Western civilization from within. And if there's anything we can learn from what's happened on TikTok this week, it's that Xi Jinping now has that army. And it is bigger and dumber than he could have possibly hoped for. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.